Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm not alone here today. I'm with Lucas and Marcel, and we will have a joint talk. So after a couple of minutes, we will change. So our talk is about making new work work. And I will talk about some principles of new work. But my first question is, do you have an idea what that is? Is anybody here have a clear idea what the concept of new work means? Yeah, that's one. Very good. Yeah, and apart from that, there are a lot of different things, a lot of different buzzwords basically in this whole concept. We talk about agile work, we talk about design thinking, about Scrum, and so on and so on. So this talk today is, we are in the danger of creating a buzzword talk, and to make it a bit fun, we created a little game. It's called Bingo. You know Bingo, normally it's with numbers, and we created a buzzword bingo, and we have my daughter Anya. She will distribute some bingo cards for you if you want to join. And every time you hear a buzzword that is on the paper, just mark it. And if you have one row or one line full with buzzwords, you can shout out bingo, and we have a little present for you from Cologne. So enjoy the bingo. Back to my question: what is new work? Let's try to define it a bit. And one way of saying it is new work is a strategic answer to constant change. And actually, new work is not so new. The concept was already developed in the 70s by a philosopher named Fritjof Bergmann. And his main idea of new work was to create a space for creativity and for self-fulfillment, or as the Americans would say, for the pursuit of happiness. And his main values that he defined were autonomy, liberty, and participation in society. So in this sense, it was a criticism to capitalism, basically. And recently, this term new work is on vogue again. It's used everywhere because we are in times where things change very fast. I just have to say digitalization, globalization, or disruptive inventions. I don't have to explain, you know what I mean. We are in a time where things really change fast, sorry. So new work tries to give a strategic answer to this constant and ever faster change. And it's not only the market conditions that change, but it's also the way people work, or the way people want to work, or what motivates people to work, that also changes. And new work, by definition, says that work gives people a purpose. And that idea seems to fit quite well with newer or younger generations. If we look at studies, this, for example, is something from Gallup. They studied millennials, and they found out that what motivated people in the past to work was mostly the paycheck. That was the main driver, the main motivator. And today, of course, you still need to earn money, but it's not what motivates people anymore in the first place. Today, it's a purpose. People need or want to work for organizations with a mission and with a purpose. Also, it's not enough for them, for young people, to have job satisfaction, but they are really pursuing a personal goal, a personal development that they want to endeavor. Also, in former times, the boss controlled everything, and today what people want from their work is more like a manager or somebody who coaches them, who coaches people, and who is more like a mentor. Then also the annual reviews that were normal in former times are now exchanged by a constant feedback, which is similar to the way younger generations communicate anyway. They're texting, they're tweeting, they're Skyping all the time, or we do that too. So we need constant communication, constant feedback also in the workspace. Then also, younger people don't want to get a fix on their weaknesses, but they want their strengths they want to develop their strength and build on them, and not focus on their weaknesses. So, to summarize, people don't see their work as a job alone, but their job is basically, for many of them, it's their life. So they really want to work for an organization where they have the chance to give their best every single day. Yeah. If we look, that was a study that I just showed that was about millennials. If we now look at the youngest generation that enters the job market now, so the generation Z, it's a similar picture. They, like almost every one of them is always on a smartphone. They have a digital footprint. They are online more than 10 hours a day. They use YouTube extensively and so on. So they are really a hyper-connected generation. And also, if you look at statistics, they say that more than half of them learn by doing, not so much from a book, but by doing. 85% regularly watches YouTube videos, for example, to learn new skills. And 75% of them think that there are better ways to learn stuff than a college education or a regular university education. So that's something we have to take in mind if we want to work with young people. In the workspace, there are also interesting statistics. For example, most of them, or 72%, ironically prefer face-to-face communication. Although they are always on their messages, they still, in the workspace, prefer face-to-face communication. I find that pretty interesting, and I will get back to that later. So, yeah, as an employer, I have to know this. I have to know how people, what motivates them. And of course, I cannot change people. All I can do is change the way we work or change our behavior towards people. So that's one thing that interested me for a couple of years. I'm interested, what can I do to do something in this war of talents and how to keep young people in my company. On the theoretical level, I wanted to look into that and I wanted to put something in practice. And the other thing is the way we worked. Once upon a time, I thought that as a project manager and as a CEO, I have to take control over everything, and that I need to be a translator, basically, between our customer and our development team. So I was always in between, and there was no direct contact between developers and the customer. And of course, then we had frictions, and there was not a lot of understanding of customers for the way developers work, and also developers didn't see what the customer wanted. So we saw pretty early that we had to change something. And of course, once we worked with agile methods, once we worked with Scrum, that all got better. But still, we know that we had to do more, that we have to change more and talk more about our values than just eliminate this middleman between the customer and the development team. So to summarize why we talk about new work, why I talk about it, I can say that I believe our economic success depends on A, how we adapt to the changing market conditions, that's one thing, and B, how we adapt to the way people behave or the way people are motivated inside and outside of our company. So that are the two main points. And we found a lot of answers to those challenging questions in the concept of new work. And we thought we have to change something in our company culture, in our leadership, in our work environment, and in the way we work together, we collaborate. So those are the three pillars that make up our plan, our own way of implementing new work in our company. And it's important to say that it's just a very personal view. So it's more like a case study, what bits and pieces of new work for us. It's not saying that this is something that works for everybody. So the first pillar, for me, the most important thing is transparency. I think transparency creates trust, and that's the most important takeaway of this talk, I guess. Transparency then needs to be translated into all the other areas, into communication, into programming, into all the tools we use, and into a culture of trust and an agile mindset. So our whole plan has more than 20 different topics. I don't want to go into every single detail, but I have a few that I want to address. So first thing, I call this from need will to want will. And I think it would be nice if there were one single recipe how to live new work. But I think there's actually only so much a company can do. And the important message is that it starts with every one of us. It starts with myself, and every employee has to look at him or herself and think, is this really the way I want to work, or is it really what I want to do? And what you really, really want to do is one of the key phrases also in the new work concept. So to speak with the picture, sometimes we live in need will. We do stuff because we have to do. But actually we know that we are only really happy and we are really performing if or when we want something. So we don't want to live in need will. One day we want to live in want will, basically. And my task is to create a purpose-driven culture to get there. And you probably all know the concept of flow, which means that when you have a challenge and your skills, you must have a balance between the two. Only if you have a balance between your challenge and your skills, then you actively and positively are engaged and can really do something. If your challenge is too high, well, you feel anxiety. If your challenge is too low, you are bored and you're indifferent. So you need to have this balance, and then things can work. So we talked about transparency, purpose-driven behavior, and one more important part in our culture is, of course, the agile mindset. I like to use this picture of a tree where the roots of the tree are our values, basically. The trunk are the agile principles, and then all the leaves at the top of the tree that are basically all the techniques and all the practices that we have in place every day. That's something Lucas and Marcel will talk about later. So today I use this picture in my trainings with people, but also my role that I described earlier is I was a translator between the customer and the development team. The role is more like a facilitator now, so this role that you have in mind when you talk about a Scrum Master. I'm more the servant leader to my team today, and I try to enable them. So, self-organization is not contrary to leadership. That is often, or self-organization is often said to be a very central element to new work. And I think there's often a misunderstanding that less hierarchy actually means there's no guidance and no leadership at all, and that we all end up in chaos. And I think, of course, that's not true. Giving up control doesn't mean that everybody can do whatever they like. It just means that rules are applied differently. There are still rules, but the rules are set within the team. That's one important thing. Every individual has or is empowered to speak up. It's another important thing. And then also rules, of course, have to be fair and they have to be transparent. So leadership is different. It's not about power and status anymore today, but it's about situational leadership. It's about the task at hand, and then people take leadership in different areas of their expertise. And the manager role, of course, is then more a coaching and a mentoring position. Then one of my favorite topics, gamification, is still in the picture. I talked about that last year in Tokyo. Since then, we developed it further, and now we use gamification in basically all areas of our work. In hiring new people, we have gamified applications, we have serious games to teach Scrum, for example, and so on. The important message here is that, if you gamify something, make sure that you don't reward an action in the past, but that you set new goals for the future so that somebody wants to get better at the next level. So that's the most important takeaway from the gamification approach, in my opinion. Then let's turn quickly to the second pillar, the work environment. And that's something we took very seriously. We started last year by developing concepts for a new workspace or for new workspaces. We talked to many architects, to interior designers, to new work specialists, and finally we designed then our own building that we call agile workspace, agile work world. And this building is being built right now and will be operational by the end of the year. So for now, it's just drawings, and the future will show what concepts work, what don't work. When we developed this, of course, we also looked at best practices. We looked at Google and all the hype companies that are known for applying innovative work concepts. And there I can tell you, be aware of a best practice trap. Like, don't do what Google does just because they do it, and it might not fit at all to your company. So it doesn't make sense to have the nicest workspace if, for example, you have a culture of mistrust in your company. It doesn't fit together. So find solutions for your own problems and don't just follow best practices. For us it was important to create different zones where we can work in small teams and bigger teams, where we can have innovation and design thinking approaches. We have lots of workshop spaces and so on. So time will tell if that works. Then also we should be... Okay, cool. Perfect. Congratulations, we will give you the gift later. Perfect. So, then when I talk about workspaces, people often ask, are you there to have fun or are you there to work? For me, it's not a contradiction to have fun at work, but that's also telling or showing you what most people think. And I know that happiness results from engagement and from a job well done. That's the main part. It's not about some superficial things that you have table soccer or fruit baskets or whatever. That doesn't create happiness. But if you have a job well done, that really creates happiness. And our third pillar in our new work concept is collaboration. And as I said, of course, we work agile. So I don't have to go into all of this. But one thing is very important, the co-creation with our customer. Co-creation for us means that we include our customer wherever possible. We use Scrum for the development, and the product owner has to come from the customer side so that the customer is included in our team all the way. We then see that normally, for example, Scrum starts with a prioritized backlog, but nobody answers normally the question, where does the backlog come from? And we saw that design thinking with this same approach of inspect and adapt can be applied very well to include the customer before the actual development. So that is very important to us, that we do co-creation all the way with our customer. So new work is basically team play. That's a very important message. And saying that, I want to give the microphone to Lucas, and he will talk more about team play.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, works. Okay. Yeah. Right. Thanks. Okay. So, as Jorg already told, yeah, we looked into behavior of a developer. So it's not only about the work environment; it's also about the player in the team. And yeah, so you have to think about the sprint as about the coding. Sorry. So the coding is like a marathon and not a sprint. So you have to think of the big picture and not just on the state. I have to get the task really well done. It's about the product at the end. Yeah. So there are certain things. For example, I've already seen the red turtle shirts, or Yoda already told this to us. Saying no or saying yes. Yeah, you have to take full responsibility. So if you shouldn't say I will try. It maybe works. You really have to say no. If it doesn't work, you have to get more information. And if you say yes, then you have to commit it to it. So really think about that if you're talking with your coworkers or with the customer. Yeah, the second thing is come on in a piece. I don't want to wait all day. This means you have to make some pauses every day. So don't work like 10 hours straight, making over hours. This just simply doesn't work. For example, we try to make pauses like every task or every 2 hours, getting away from the computer. Taking a breath, look at the other one, what is he doing? Maybe he has a problem. I will get into that later. Yeah, so take care of yourself if you're working, because too much focus doesn't work. Yeah, maybe you know this trading card game, Magic the Gathering. It's. I want to talk about your own mana. You have to use your mana carefully. It's like your own resource, your endurance over the whole day. So like in the trading card game, you have to really take care how much mana you want to use. And like I talked about your own focus, it's really good if you're working like 2 hours focused, like with music on, and really try to get your problem done, because they are really complex tasks you are doing. And so we already get that multitasking doesn't work so well if you're going on a complex task. Our approach is that we have some dedicated internalists that doing the internal support. So if something went wrong on some servers, we don't get interrupted, and this person switches like every week. So we can stay more focused in our zone. And the other thing is that we have weekly meetings and daily meetings, optional if we want to take to talk over technical difficulties or something that went wrong yesterday. But there are some time boxes we can use for it, and not just interrupt every second. I think this is a good point. Yeah, and programming on the other side is also about communication. So taking the full day just in the zone doesn't work as well. So collaboration is really important. So you're not a lone fighter if you're working in a team. So passing your knowledge to your teammates, watching around. Like if you have your zone for 2 hours, then watch on your neighbor. If he has a big problem, help him. Provide help and get help, and respect each other and appreciate what the other did. So you can work happy on your code. Take your headphones off, world off. This doesn't work all the time. And the other part is estimations are estimations. So don't take it too hard on you. because yeah, holding on to estimations lead to unnecessary pressure the whole day over, or to yeah, trust that your trust is weakened. These are still estimations, so if you're doing more estimations or more experienced in some products, then you get better at it and get better estimations. It's like not you have to, that the day is over if you are 2 hours over your task. Yeah, what we are trying to do is planning poker, so don't work with time, work with points. I take 2 points to complete this task, and then you can have more relationship to other tasks. Yeah, to not nail it on 2 hours and 35 minutes. And yeah, my last point is that your career is your responsibility, not your employer's ones. So do practice, make it to your yeah, make it to your perfection to be the best at your job. Get, for example, into Plone and open source projects. Yeah, to share your knowledge. Do agile game nights to get better at agiling, working in a team, or compete against each other with gamification to yeah, to share your knowledge. For example, do presentations on the Plone conference. Right, and now Marcel will talk about rules we have set up inside our code. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. And yeah, besides improving our personality and our behavior as a good developer, yeah, as Lucas said, we defined some coding rules. So yeah, here you can see some of our important rules we have defined, and all of our programmer has to, yeah, or should respect and follow them. And the goal of them is to write clean code and better code. And yeah, so let's take this is a real photo of our list. As you can see, there are some more points, but I will just talk about the first 4. So yeah. The first rule is base code rule, and it means you should always leave your code a little bit better than you found it. And yeah, the problem sometimes is you found you have a project, it's maybe old or I don't know, but the problem sometimes is the code is in a bad state. Maybe it violates some of your coding convention or design principles, so you would like to fix them, but the problem often is, yeah, there is no time. And the goals of this rule is to make it easier over time to maintain your code and change anything in your code. And yeah, so, but just do every time just small changes to it, and so it's easier to change them. And yeah, to keep your code in a good condition. But it's also very important if you want to change anything in your code. Of course, you should have some automated tests, and so that nobody in your team should be afraid to change anything in it. Okay, our next rule is functions should only serve one purpose only, because if it would be more than one purpose, it's increase the complexity of your code, and that is bad. So yeah, keep it simple. And how we should try it. We tried to keep functions small, just one purpose, and yeah, we try also to avoid flag arguments, because arguments could be change the internal state of your functions also, so it would also increase the complexity. And yeah, we try to avoid that also. So the same goes for the parameter account. So a maximum of 3 parameters is allowed for us, but not more, because if you have a function with one purpose, which is very small, then it's also easy to write some tests for it, and it's easy to change anything in your code. Just imagine if you want to refactor your code, it's easier if it's just small. Okay. The next rule is write test and time. Sometimes there's so much pressure on the developer there are so many tasks and you don't know how to handle it. Maybe you're thinking of, okay, then I maybe skip some tests and just do not write some tests. But that means you have no quality control over your code. And yeah, that's not so bad. We don't have a really solution for this problem, but it's more like a compromise in our team. And we said it's okay if you do not write tests instantly. So it's not more. It's not like a test-driven development. It's more. Yeah, you should write as soon as possible, but you do not write it immediately. But we defined that must be some tests before we do some internal review, and also there must be some tests before we roll out our bigger changes to production or everything else. Okay, the last rule I would show you is code is bigger than documentation, and sometimes you have some outdated code in your, sometimes outdated comments in your code, and yeah, that's not so good. But comments just a way maybe to explain your code, so it would be better if your code just is self-explaining. So instead of writing some comments, use your time and try to refactor your code. And yeah, you can use your code as the latest documentation, and so it's no problem with outdated comments. And the goal of this rule is, yeah, of course, to avoid any kind of redundant comments or misleading comments. And it's also good if you have some code in you want to remove, not to comment it out, because later on nobody knows what's going on with this code, and then no other developer will ever touch it again. So we decide, yeah, we want not comment out any code. If you want to remove it, then we remove it, and we are fine. Okay, that's it. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
If you want to just want to add some comment, you were talking about smell in code, and it's maybe nice to mention the topic technical debt, which you may use to find out interesting write-ups about this issue, how you introduce technical debt into your development and how to rate these different smells of code and use that to weed it out. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So sometimes if we see, okay, we have some task in our sprint, for example, and yeah, there is just there's no point where we say, yeah, we have to refactor the the problem, and yeah, then we try to make a new task for the next next days, yeah, to target these problems. So yeah, technical debt is something you don't give the customer in. The customer doesn't have to pay, and what you try to fix, but you have it just in mind. You have to make a task for it. You have to target it, and yeah, right.